Chapter 1. A new power emerges. In the eerie calm that followed the tumultuous events of the gods' intervention and Winter's apparent demise, the landscape of the supernatural realm began to shift once more. On a seemingly ordinary day, the necromancer walked alone across a vast, desolate field. The ground beneath his feet was barren, marked by the scars of past battles and the quiet despair that had fallen over the land. As he reached the center of the field, the necromancer stopped and spread his arms wide, his cloak fluttering in the wind. With a deep, resonant chant, he called upon Necros, the god of the undead, channeling the last vestiges of divine energy that had been discreetly tipped in his favor. In this critical moment, unbeknownst to the other gods, Necros had chosen to alter the balance of power subtly but significantly. Beneath the earth, something stirred. It began as a faint rumbling, then escalated into a cacophony of sounds as hundreds of undead beings clawed their way to the surface. However, these were no ordinary undead. Their eyes burned with the fire of Necros, glowing ominously in the dim light. These new warriors were stronger, more durable, and uniquely impervious to the Elder's shadow attacks, a strategic enhancement by Necros to fortify his legion against their primary weakness. The necromancer's face split into a wide, satisfied smile as he watched his new army rise. These were not merely undead. They were undead killing machines, each infused with a fragment of divine power that made them a formidable force on the battlefield. With the gods temporarily out of action, recovering from their exertions against Winter, and with Winter himself no longer a player in this grand game, the necromancer saw an unrivaled opportunity to seize control. As the newly risen undead gathered around him, the necromancer raised his staff, signaling the beginning of a new phase in the supernatural war. "With this army," he proclaimed, his voice carrying across the windswept field, "we will tip the scales in our favor. The elders, the lichens, and any who stand against us will fall." In the distance, the shadows of the elders' dark castle loomed, a reminder of the battles to come. But with his ranks now bolstered by these powerful new undead, the necromancer felt a surge of confidence. The sheer number and enhanced capabilities of his forces promised a shift in the power dynamics of the realm, potentially leading to an era dominated by the undead. The implications of this new development begin to ripple across the realm. Allies and enemies alike sense the change, and strategies are hastily redrawn. The supernatural factions will need to respond to this new threat, forging unlikely alliances and confronting internal betrayals, all in a desperate bid to survive in the ever-evolving game of gods and monsters. Will they unite to face this common enemy, or will the realm fracture further under the weight of its own divisions? Descent of darkness. The tranquility of the center camp was shattered by the urgent cries of a scout atop the lookout. "They're back!" he shouted, his voice laced with panic. "More of them!" The alarm bells rang out, piercing the relative calm of the morning and thrusting the camp into a state of emergency. Marco, peering through his binoculars, made a chilling observation that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard. "Look at their eyes. They are like the ones from before," he said, noting the unnatural glow that seemed all too familiar. Alex's response was grim. "If they are, we could be in serious trouble here." The memories of their previous encounters with such formidable foes were fresh, and none were eager to relive those dark moments. Nina, ever decisive, knew what had to be done. "Prepare a full evacuation of this camp," she ordered, her voice resolute despite the rising dread. As they mobilized to evacuate, the newly risen undead smashed against the camp's defenses with terrifying force, ignoring the scarecrows and other diversions that had worked in the past. These undead, smarter, faster, and stronger, began demolishing the barriers. The guards, overwhelmed by the ferocity and resilience of their attackers, quickly fell under their relentless assault. Nothing seemed to stop these enhanced creatures. Their strength was amplified, and their durability surpassed anything the defenders had seen before. After a fierce, one-sided battle, Nina made the heart-wrenching decision to retreat. "Retreat!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Alex, Marco, Nina, Rebecca, and around 20 survivors managed to escape, though not without witnessing the fall of their camp to the supernatural undead. The fire in the eyes of their assailants showcased their sheer power, a chilling testament to the necromancer's success. "We'll need to hurry to the stronghold, to warn whoever is there," Nina stated as they hurried away from the carnage. "We dare not stop. These undead are fast and inexhaustible." Back at the now defeated center camp, a chilling sight awaited any onlooker brave enough to witness it. The fallen, once comrades and friends, now rose with the same fiery glow in their eyes, joining the ranks of the newly summoned undead. This grotesque transformation of the dead into relentless warriors added a horrific new dimension to the necromancer's army. At the back of the ranks of this terrifying force, the necromancer stood, observing the devastation his creation wrought with a cold satisfaction. Lifting his arms towards the darkened skies, he shouted, "For you, my Lord Necros!" His declaration was not just a statement of allegiance, but a proclamation of the dark intent that had fueled the creation of this new undead army. As the survivors made their desperate journey to the stronghold, the stakes were higher than ever. With the gods momentarily out of action, and Winter's fate uncertain, the realm's only hope lay in rallying its forces for a counterattack that could stem the tide of darkness unleashed by the necromancer's unholy ambition. Clash of shadows and bones. In the dimly lit chambers of the dark castle, Elder received unsettling news with a grimace. A scout from the Elders, out of breath and clearly shaken, rushed in with a dire report. "Their numbers are huge," he relayed with urgency. "The undead have overtaken a camp." Elder, frowning deeply, questioned the origins of this newfound strength among the undead. How did they get so numerous? He mused aloud, more to himself than anyone else. After a moment's contemplation, he dismissed the need for further inquiry with a wave of his hand. "No matter. We will squash them. Our shadow power will crush them. Send 10 of our best fighters to intercept these walking corpses," he commanded confidently. "Yes, Master," replied the scout, nodding quickly before disappearing to carry out the orders. Sometime later, 10 shadows moved with the speed of night, utilizing their ability to shift from shadow to shadow with supernatural speed. As they approached the undead legion, they prepared themselves for what had always been a routine tactic, moving as shadows among the undead, their mere presence deadly to the reanimated corpses. The undead horde, however, marched with an increased velocity, driven by the godly fire in their eyes that pushed them beyond ordinary limits. As the Elders launched their attack, expecting to easily dissipate through the ranks of undead, as they had done countless times before, they were met with an unexpected resistance. Instead of passing through, it was like colliding with a solid wall. Surprised and disoriented, the Elders fell to the ground. In an instant, the undead were upon them, tearing, biting and clawing with a ferocity and strength that was not just supernatural but divine. The undead overwhelmed the Elders. Within seconds, 4 of the Elders lay destroyed, their forms dissipating into the shadows from whence they came. The remaining 6 tried to retreat, panic setting in, as another 3 were destroyed in their desperate attempt to flee. Only 3 managed to escape, carrying with them the scars of their encounter and the shock of their brethren's demise. The scene was brutal and swift, highlighting the sheer power and relentless nature of the undead. The powerful elders, once feared and revered, lay defeated and scattered by an enemy that had evolved beyond their control. The undead, imbued with divine strength and an unholy resilience, showcased a frightening new reality for all inhabitants of the realm. Even the elders, with all their dark powers, were helpless against this enhanced menace. This devastating encounter served as a chilling reminder of the undead's capabilities and hinted at the dark potential of the necromancer's latest creations. As the 3 surviving elders returned to their stronghold, their report would sow seeds of fear and doubt among their ranks. The balance of power was shifting, and now every faction in the realm had to reckon with a new, formidable enemy that could very well dictate the fate of their world. Desperation and despair. "Impossible!" Eldor screamed as he slammed his fist down upon the ancient wooden table in the dimly lit war room. The impact echoed through the chamber as he was briefed on the new capabilities of the undead. An elder fighter, his face etched with fear, reported, "Their eyes? They burned with fire." "Fire?" Sorana echoed, her voice tinged with disbelief. "They have help from their god. The gods are interfering once again," she concluded grimly. "And yet Nocturna cannot hear my pleas?" Elder questioned bitterly, his frustration palpable as he grappled with the gods' apparent abandonment. "They were too strong, too fast, and resistant to our shadow," the elder fighter added, shaking his head in dismay. Another elder chimed in, "And their numbers are huge, thousands." "Thousands?" Elder barked out the word as if it were a curse. "With that many, nothing can stop them." "What about this winter?" Sorana suddenly proposed, grasping at any straw that might offer them a chance. "Yes, Winter. He may be the only one who can," Elder agreed, a new resolve forming. "We need to find him." Meanwhile, Captain Knox and Captain Harris drove their convoy urgently back to the stronghold. As they navigated the rugged terrain, Captain Harris spotted a huge cloud of dust in the distance. "What's that up ahead?" he asked, squinting against the glare of the sun. As they drew closer, the source of the dust became horrifyingly clear. A massive horde of undead, marching at a terrifying speed. The ground shook under the relentless march of countless feet, kicking up clouds of dust that shrouded them in a grim haze. Before they could maneuver or prepare, the horde noticed them. With terrifying speed, the undead turned and charged the convoy. A horde of death, destroying anything in its path. The convoy spun around, the 10 vehicles maneuvering with practiced speed, but it was too little too late. Within moments, the undead swarmed over them, covering the vehicles like ants attacking a fallen fruit, tearing away the metal doors as if they were made of paper. The helplessness of the fighters was palpable as they struggled against the overwhelming force of the overpowered undead. Just 2 vehicles managed to escape, the 2 lead vehicles driven by Captains Knox and Harris. As they sped away from the carnage, Captain Knox turned to Harris, her expression grim. "We've seen these before, but we had silver weapons then. That caused them to become sluggish and easier to kill," she explained urgently. "We have no silver here," Captain Harris replied, his voice heavy with the weight of their dire situation. "If they reach the stronghold, everyone will die." The chapter ends with the 2 captains speeding towards the stronghold, desperation driving them as they face the very real possibility that they may be bringing the news of an unstoppable force directly to the last bastion of human resistance. The fear of what might come if they fail weighs heavily on them, driving them to push their vehicles and themselves to the limits. Desperation at the stronghold. The atmosphere at the stronghold was tense as Elena and Commander Harris surveyed the defenses, their expressions marked by concern. Any news on the convoy? Elena asked, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet of the early dawn. No, replied Commander Harris, shaking his head. Something feels off, Elena added, her intuition on high alert. We need those fighters back here. This place is vulnerable with the small number of fighters we have, Commander Harris stated, his voice carrying a sense of urgency. He was keenly aware of how thinly spread their defenses were, a fact that did nothing to ease his growing anxiety. Well, at least we have these, Elena said, holding up one of the strange tubes left by Winter. Her grip tightened as she pondered their uncertain future. How did he know the elders would betray us, and where is he now? She questioned aloud. Commander Lewis, who had been quietly listening, responded grimly, He knows more than any of us. To him, we are no more than ants fighting each other. He just decides who wins. His tone was bitter, reflecting a mix of respect and resentment towards Winter's enigmatic maneuvers. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a shout from a guard on the watchtower. The convoy is back. His voice was a mix of relief and urgency. Thank God, breathed Elena as she and Commander Harris rushed to meet them. What greeted them, however, was a somber sight. Only 2 vehicles returned, kicking up dust as they halted sharply within the stronghold gates. Knox and Harris climbed out of the vehicles, their faces etched with dread and exhaustion. The gravity of their expressions foretold the grim news before a word was spoken. Commander Harris approached them quickly. What happened? He demanded, looking between Knox and Harris for answers. Knox, her voice steady despite the clear strain, began to recount their harrowing experience. The undead. They've changed. They're not like before. They're faster, stronger, and they tore through our defenses as if they were nothing. Her report painted a vivid picture of the overwhelming power they had encountered. Harris added, They'll be here within 24 hours. They march at a supernatural speed, and nothing we did could slow them down. The implication of his words hung heavily in the air. A silence fell over the group as they processed the news. One of the younger officers, trying to grasp at any hope, suggested, Should we reinforce the walls? Commander Lewis, usually a man of action, shook his head. It would be pointless, he said gravely. This undead horde, with godly power, is too powerful. Nothing can stop them. His statement was not one of defeat, but a stark realization of the dire situation they faced. As they stood in the dim light of dawn, the stark reality set in. The stronghold, once a beacon of safety and resistance, now seemed little more than a fragile shell that could be shattered at any moment by the impending force. The commanders exchanged looks of grim resolve, understanding that their next steps might be their last stand. Unlikely allies. Alex, Nina, Marco, and Rebecca hastened towards the stronghold, vigilantly avoiding any encounters with the undead. We must not engage these undead, Alex stated firmly as they navigated the treacherous landscape. They are too strong. We would all be killed. As they moved closer to their destination, a sudden rustle from the trees caught their attention. Bursting forth at an incredible speed, a small group of undead, obviously left to ambush any stragglers, charged towards them. The small group of survivors looked on in horror, their hearts pounding in their chests. Stand and fight, Alex commanded, squaring his shoulders against the imminent threat. If we go down fighting, Marco added, his voice resolute. The group of now 8 hastily formed a defensive square, with Alex and Marco at the front, bracing for impact. Oh God, Nina whispered, the scene steeped in hopelessness and panic. The odds were overwhelmingly against them. The godly power of the undead meant almost certain death. Just as the undead were about to collide with the desperate survivors, a new force erupted into the fray. 10 lichens sprang from seemingly nowhere, their arrival as sudden as it was savage. A fierce clash erupted. The battle was evenly matched at first, the undead strong and relentless, the Lycans fierce and primal. Then came the howl, the commanding, thunderous howl of the Alpha. Invigorating his pack, the Lycans seemed to draw ferocity from the earth itself, their attacks becoming more aggressive, more coordinated. Slowly the Lycans started to gain the upper hand, until more undead rushed from the surrounding woods. But the Alpha leapt into their path, his presence huge, powerful and primal. With relative ease, he dispatched the small number of undead, while the other Lycans finished up the rest of the group. As the dust settled and the Lycans gathered around their leader, the survivors exchanged worried glances. "From the frying pan," Rebecca muttered, eyeing the formidable beasts that now turned their attention towards them. In an incredible turn of events, the Lycans did not attack. The Alpha approached, his massive form looming over the group, his eyes burning with primal rage. Yet instead of attacking, he stopped short and held up a chrome mask, the mask of winter. Then he pointed towards the Lycan's stronghold. Alex spoke up, his voice laced with urgency. "We need to save our friends. We cannot go that way." The Alpha held Winter's mask up in the air, almost like a symbol, and roared, a deep, resonating sound that filled the air. The other Lycans joined in this primal roar, creating a chorus that echoed through the forest. What did the Alpha know about Winter? Had Winter embedded some unknown knowledge into the Alpha? Something only they knew. Why didn't the Alpha convert the survivors into Lycans? These questions hung in the air as the survivors stood, caught between the remnants of their escape and the cryptic message of a Lycan leader who seemed to hold keys to mysteries even deeper than the ones they faced. The day had brought them an unexpected alliance, but it was clear that the journey ahead would be fraught with new challenges and revelations. The tide turns. The necromancer, Stephen Lestat, stood atop a hill, gazing down at the relentless march of his undead horde. A satisfied smile curled his lips as he muttered to himself, "We are unstoppable. We have surely won this game." The view of the human stronghold now lay just within sight, the final obstacle in his path to complete dominion. At the stronghold, the remaining survivors watched, with a mix of dread and resignation, as the sea of undead approached. "It's over," Captain Harris whispered, the weight of defeat heavy in his voice. Behind the walls, the team hastily made plans to escape and retreat, knowing full well that their chances were slim and the stronghold would soon be overrun. Meanwhile, back at the Dark Castle, Eldor was deep in conversation with Serana when a scout burst in, his face pale with terror. "They're here," he gasped out, his words sending a chill through the room. Rushing to a vantage point, Eldor's gaze fell upon the massive wave of the necromancer's undead, their eyes burning with an unnatural, godly power. "What is this?" Eldor exclaimed, disbelief lacing his tone as he struggled to comprehend the scale of the undead force. How has their army grown so vast? "We cannot win this battle," Serana said, her voice a somber echo of Eldor's fear. "We must flee." "If we flee this castle, we lose," Eldor countered, desperation creeping into his voice as he faced the untenable situation. "If we stay, we die," Serana retorted sharply, her pragmatic survival instinct cutting through the despair. The undead horde advanced with a relentless, inexorable pace, their numbers swelling with each passing moment. As the elders watched, it became evident that the undead were not just maintaining their strength. They were growing stronger, each victim of their rampage rising to join their ranks. This exponential growth in power made them an unstoppable force, so potent that no other faction, human or supernatural, could hope to stand against them. The game, set into motion by the gods, seemed poised for a grim conclusion, dominated by the undead. This chilling realization settled over both the stronghold and the dark castle. The undead, once mere pawns in the larger game, had now become the masters of the board, guided by the necromancer's ruthless ambition and the dark blessings of the god Necros. As the stronghold prepared for a last, desperate flight, and the elders contemplated the unthinkable option of abandoning their ancient seat of power, the landscape of the realm shifted towards a dark new era, an era where no power could stand against the undead's might. The brink of desolation. At the Alpha's treetop stronghold, the situation had grown dire. From his vantage point, high among the ancient trees, the Alpha looked out over a vast, undulating sea of death. The undead, driven by the dark power of Necros, stretched across the horizon, their numbers far surpassing any threat the Lycans had faced before. This was not a small group that could be dispatched with swift, ferocious attacks. This was an overwhelming tide of darkness, each creature infused with supernatural strength, typically marked by fierce primal energy and readiness for battle. The Alpha now sat quietly, almost as if accepting the grim fate that awaited. However, in his grasp, he held the mask of winter, treating it not merely as a relic, but as a symbol, perhaps of hope or an unrevealed plan. This enigmatic behavior suggested that there might be more at play than mere resignation. The Alpha and Winter shared a bond unlike any other. Had Winter, before his apparent demise, foreseen this scenario and imparted knowledge of a final contingency to the Alpha? As the undead marched closer, their numbers swelling and their unholy vigor apparent, the question remained: how could a few Lycans hope to stop this advancing horde of death? The reality was stark. The Lycans could not match the undead in number or power. Across the realm, each stronghold braced for the end. The necromancer, sensing the imminent victory of his undead legions, issued one last command with a triumphant cry, "For Necros!" At his words, the undead charged with renewed ferocity, a final push to obliterate all resistance. As the undead unleashed their full might, the scene was set for a catastrophic conclusion. The lands of the living stood on the precipice of annihilation, with seemingly no hope of reprieve. As the realm teeters on the edge of ruin, questions swirl like the dark winds that drive the undead forward. Have the undead finally won the game set by the gods? Does the Alpha know some hidden plan, or has he truly accepted his fate? With the forces of life dwindling and the shadows of death growing ever stronger, will anyone survive? Find out in episode 5 of Crimson Dawn, where the final chapters of this epic saga unfold. Will there be light after the dawn, or will the night reign eternal? Stay tuned for the thrilling continuation of a battle that will decide the fate of all who dwell within this haunted world.
Greetings, mortals. I am Necros, the god of the undead and the dark influence behind Stephen Lestat. Winter may have cheated me of my prize, but know this, all things come to an end, and when they do, they join my eternal flock. I see you've been watching the Crimson Dawn series. Wise choice, and do not forget to subscribe, or you may find yourself a part of my realm sooner than expected. Remember, no matter your faction, all paths lead to me in the end. Until then, enjoy the show, while you still can.
Chapter 1. Winter's Resurgence. The light was endless, an infinite expanse that would have overwhelmed any other, but Winter continued his eternal walk towards it. The gods had unleashed their most potent attacks in an attempt to destroy him. However, Winter, ever the strategist and innovator, had adapted his weapon to sample the very code of the gods' power. What was intended to destroy him was about to become his salvation. As he approached the blinding luminescence, he did something unprecedented. He stopped. Standing at the threshold of what seemed like eternity, he declared, "I am Winter, and I must leave this place." His mind, always calculating, had already foreseen this scenario. He was prepared for every possible outcome, his strategies laid out with meticulous precision. From this void, Winter began to extend his reach, connecting his essence to the realm of the gods. Small trails of light, barely visible to the mortal eye, began to search for the gods' hidden sanctum, the sacred place where they retreated to regain their power after their exertions in the mortal realm. Winter's essence, enhanced by his heightened cognitive abilities and the data harvested by his weapon before it was obliterated, scanned the entire realm in mere moments. He located the sanctum, a feat no other man or god had accomplished. With his target in sight and his objectives clear, Winter focused on the next phase of his plan. Using his newly acquired powers and the advanced instruments integrated into his weapon, he initiated the creation of a portal. This wasn't just any portal. It was a gateway that would breach the wall between the mortal realm and the sacred space of the gods. An enormous explosion of godly energy shattered the wall of reality as the portal stabilized. The fabric of the universe trembled at the audacity of a mortal transcending his boundaries. With a step that resonated with the force of destiny, Winter walked through the portal, emerging into the realm of the gods. The implications of his arrival were monumental. By entering the gods' domain, Winter challenged the fundamental laws that govern the balance between the divine and the mortal. This act was an affront to the gods, a defiance of the natural order, and it was sure to provoke a response of unprecedented magnitude. As Winter stepped into the sanctum, the air thick with divine energy and the quiet power of slumbering gods, he was ready. His actions were set to ripple across the realms, potentially reshaping the dynamics of power forever. His return was not just a rebirth, but a heralding of a new era, where the lines between God and man might blur into oblivion. What happens when a mortal challenges the divine on their own ground? What are the consequences of altering the fabric of reality? These questions hung in the air, charged with potential, as Winter stood ready to face whatever came next. His journey had taken him from a mere mortal to a player on the cosmic stage, and his game was far from over. Winter's Ascension. As Winter emerged from the portal, the fabric of his being was in flux, not yet fully formed. With a deliberate focus, he channeled his newfound powers to reassemble himself. Now cloaked in a deep red cloak and donning his familiar chrome mask, his new guise symbolized his transformation from a mere mortal to a being of significant power. "I have the power of the gods," he murmured to himself, his voice echoing slightly in the vast emptiness of the divine realm. "But I need more. I need the gods' energy." His thoughts briefly turned to his deeper motivation. "Mara, we shall soon be together again." As Winter advanced towards the slumbering gods, 3 ethereal images appeared before him, each one a sentinel, emanating from the gods' collective will. "You must not approach the gods, mortal," they warned in unison, their voices blending into a harmonic caution. Winter, undeterred, walked past these images without so much as a glance. His resolve was clear, and no spectral guardian would dissuade him from his path. Each god was located in a different part of this celestial realm, each ensconced in a stronghold that reflected their essence: the vampire god, the undead god, and the lichen god. "I require all of them," Winter declared, his voice resolute and unwavering. Scanning the horizon, Winter chose his first target, Necros, god of the undead. He began his trek across a desolate landscape, a land of the dead where bones and the bodies of the fallen lay in abundance. Each step crunched and crackled underfoot, the ground littered with the remnants of countless battles and forgotten tragedies. The terrain itself seemed to breathe desolation, with skeletal trees clawing at the sky, and a thick fog that curled around his ankles. As he walked, the air grew colder, and the light dimmed, as if the very atmosphere was tainted by the presence of death. This was Necros' domain, a testament to the god's reign over decay and demise. Up ahead, the sanctum of Necros loomed, a dark fortress that rose out of the barren landscape like a monument to desolation. Its towering walls were adorned with carvings of the undead, scenes of eternal unrest and sorrow etched into the stone. The gate, a massive structure of iron and bone, stood ajar, as if inviting Winter to enter. Winter paused for a moment before the gate, taking in the foreboding structure. His journey had led him to this point, a confrontation that was inevitable yet filled with unknowns. With each god housed in their sanctum, drawing on their energies would not be a simple task. However, Winter was no longer a simple man. He was something more, something that even the gods had not foreseen. As he stepped into the shadow of Necros' sanctum, his resolve hardened. This was the first of his confrontations, and he was prepared to claim the power he needed to achieve his ends. The fate of the realm, of Mara, and of himself would be decided in these encounters with the divine. Of the confrontation at Necros' sanctum. Winter stepped into the sanctum of Necros with an air of calculated resolve. The sanctum was a cavernous space filled with the essence of death and decay, manifesting the very core of Necros' power. Across from him, seated on a throne of bones and shadow, was Necros himself, the powerful god of the undead, his presence radiating an aura of formidable power. "You have chosen death, mortal." "Here I am all-powerful," Necros declared, his voice echoing ominously throughout the sanctum. Winter, unfazed, took a seat across from him, his demeanor calm and his intentions clear. Winter began to explain, his voice steady and confident. "It was you, Necros, who have chosen the god's demise. I calculated that you would interfere in the game of the gods. This sparked enough of a disruption to help me regain my consciousness in the void. Had you not done this and played fair, you may have won. But unfortunately for you, I have manipulated you since day one." Necros, angered by Winter's revelation, rose from his throne, his form becoming a swirling mass of dark energy. "Nothing can survive death, mortal," he snarled, unleashing his most powerful attack, a torrent of necrotic energy that could obliterate anything it touched. Winter simply stood and absorbed the power Necros threw at him. The energy, dark and potent, seemed to flow into him, filling him with every ounce of divine strength Necros wielded. "Thank you. This is exactly what I needed," Winter said calmly, a slight smile playing on his lips. With a small gesture of his hand, he unleashed a counterforce that was subtle yet devastating. The entire sanctum of Necros exploded in a spectacular display of light and shadow, every ounce of godly power absorbed by Winter in the process. Necros, caught in the backlash of his own unleashed power and the cunning counter of Winter, screamed, "No! Impossible! I am death! I cannot die!" But his words faded as he crumbled lifelessly to the floor, his reign ended by the very mortal he had deemed insignificant. "One down," Winter remarked coldly, as he now set his sights on the next god, the vampire god. His steps were measured and purposeful as he exited the remnants of Necros' sanctum, his power greatly augmented by the energy he had absorbed. The landscape of the divine was shifting, and Winter was the catalyst for this change. As he prepared to confront the next deity, Winter's strategy was clear. He would use the gods' own powers against them, turning their divine strengths into their ultimate weaknesses. The game of the gods was evolving into a battle for supremacy, with Winter positioning himself as a new kind of deity, one forged from the ambitions and failures of the old. The fall of Nocturna. Winter's journey across the land of the vampire god was like a descent into a nightmarish abyss. The landscape was grotesque, with blood-soaked grounds and bodies strewn across fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. This was a parasitic land, where every plant and creature seemed to thrive on the corruption and decay of others. Vines with vein-like tendrils wrapped around the fallen, draining them of any residual essence, while the air was thick with the scent of iron and despair. Every step Winter took was accompanied by the squelch of blood-soaked earth, painting a horrifying tableau of Nocturna's dominion. Upon entering the sanctum of Nocturna, Winter was immediately confronted by the vampire god himself, who appeared as a tall, imposing figure, cloaked in shadows that seemed to drink the light from the room. "How dare you enter the sanctum of Nocturna?" the god boomed, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "No mortal may be here." Winter, unfazed by the grandeur or the wrath of the vampire god, looked directly at Nocturna. "You possibly had the highest chance to win this game, but I have been pulling the strings since day one. Now your only hope is to surrender," he stated calmly, his voice resolute amidst the oppressive aura of the sanctum. Enraged by the audacity and the calm demeanor of Winter, Nocturna's eyes burned with ancient fury. "I will drink your blood and your soul," he snarled, unleashing a devastating attack. Powerful shadows surged forward, extensions of Nocturna's will, designed to steal the very life from all things. These shadows had obliterated armies and swallowed entire villages in despair. But instead of harming Winter, the shadows seemed to be absorbed by him, drawn into his body as if fueling him further. Winter stood, unfazed by the onslaught, his figure becoming a conduit for the very power Nocturna wielded against him. Without a word, Winter raised his hand, channeling the absorbed energy into a counterforce. A massive explosion of godlike energy erupted, the backlash devastating everything in its wake. The sanctum, once a place of dark reverence, crumbled under the force, stone and shadow blasting outward. When the dust settled, Nocturna lay on the stone floor, his energy depleted, his form barely more than a husk of the powerful deity he once was. "One more," Winter said quietly, turning his attention away from the fallen vampire god. His confidence was unshaken, his mission clear. With each god he faced, he absorbed their strengths and made them his own, becoming something more than a god, a being forged in the crucible of divine power and mortal ingenuity. As Winter left the ruins of Nocturna's sanctum, the land itself seemed to mourn the fall of its god. The air grew colder, the blood-soaked earth beginning to freeze as if the very life of the land had been extinguished with its master. Winter's path now led to the final deity, the lichen god, Lysanor, where the ultimate confrontation awaited. The convergence of power. Wasting no time after his confrontation with Nocturna, Winter continued his quest across a field that was a stark contrast to the lands of the other gods. Here, in the domain of Lysanor, the grass was lush and green, and the vegetation thrived, an embodiment of nature and life itself. This landscape was vibrant and full of energy, reflecting Lysanor's essence as the deity of life and nature. As winter approached Lysanor's sanctum, the air grew richer, filled with the earthy scent of growing things and the vibrant hum of life. The sanctum itself was integrated seamlessly into its surroundings, with walls covered in climbing vines and openings that allowed light and air to circulate freely, blurring the lines between the built environment and the natural world. Upon entering the sanctum, Winter was immediately greeted by Lysanor himself. Unlike the hostile receptions he had encountered from the other gods, Lysanor's demeanor was calm and welcoming. "Welcome, Simon," Lysanor said, his voice resonating with a deep connection to the earth. "I have foreseen this day." "Indeed," Winter replied, his tone acknowledging the inevitability of their meeting. "It seems my lichens have some type of bond with you," Lysanor continued, his eyes searching Winter's. "Your lichen?" Winter questioned, his expression hardening slightly. "If it were not for me, they would all be dead now. You left a cub alone when you could have aided him," Winter accused, his voice tinged with reproach. "Yes, but I had foreseen your intervention, Simon. I knew what must happen. None of us could be trusted to restore the world as it was, not even me. But you have a drive that exceeds petty greed or the need to win," Lysanor explained, his gaze intense and earnest. "Will you restore the world as it was, or make a better one without the gods?" Lysanor posed the question not as a challenge, but as an inquiry into Winter's intentions. Winter, momentarily pausing at the gravity of Lysanor's words, responded not to the philosophical inquiry, but to the immediate task at hand. "Are you ready?" he asked simply, his mind already moving towards the conclusion of their encounter. "Yes, but there is no need for dramatics. Take my hand, and my power is yours," Lysanor offered, extending his hand in a gesture of surrender and trust. Winter reached out and grasped Lysanor's hand. Within moments, a surge of power flowed from Lysanor to Winter, a transfer so profound and complete that it seemed to dim the very light of the sanctum. All of Lysanor's power, the essence of life and nature, was now integrated into Winter's being. With the power of all three gods now his, Winter stood amidst the sanctum, the sole arbiter of immense divine abilities. The gods lay defeated, their powers absorbed by a mortal who had transcended his limitations. Winter now possessed enough power to restore reality, or to shape it anew, according to his vision and will. As he left the sanctum, stepping back into the vibrant field, Winter contemplated his next steps. With the fate of multiple realms in his hands, the choices he made next would define the future of all existence. The question now was not just what he could do, but what he should do with the unprecedented power at his command. The final act. "It is done, Mara. Inevitable," Winter murmured softly, his voice a mixture of resolve and weariness. The conquest and absorption of the gods' powers had culminated in this moment, yet Winter knew his journey was not yet complete. "But there is one more thing I must do," he acknowledged, understanding the full weight of his next actions. Transforming his appearance from the godly visage he had adopted in the Divine realm, Winter reshaped his image to one more suited for the mortal world. He needed to blend in, if only for a moment, to complete what he started, without drawing undue attention from the remnants of the realm's inhabitants. Summoning the combined powers of the gods, Winter created a portal from the godly sanctum directly into the realm the gods had created. The energies warped around him, bending and twisting as he stepped through, moving through reality itself. The portal was a conduit through the very fabric of existence, a path that led him back to where it all began. Emerging onto a battlefield, Winter found himself in the midst of chaos. Hundreds of undead assaulted the stronghold of the Lycans, their relentless siege marking the desperation of their final push. The undead rushed by Winter as if he were invisible, his presence too advanced, too alien for them to even recognize or comprehend. From his vantage point, Winter could see the stronghold below. His eyes then caught the Alpha, whose expression was one of resignation and completion, perhaps sensing the end of all things. Behind Winter's mask, what remained of his humanity allowed himself a small, sad smile. This creature, this Alpha, had shown resilience and bravery, traits Winter once admired in his own kind. With a mere gesture, informed by a resolve to end the suffering and chaos once and for all, Winter unleashed a devastating wave of power. The entire Lycan stronghold and every undead surrounding it were obliterated in a massive explosion that shook the very ground they stood on. Simultaneously, across the realm, the Dark Castle, the Bone Castle, and all the human strongholds and camps suffered the same fate. An all-encompassing burst of godly energy eradicated every structure, every life, and every remnant of the conflict that had plagued this realm. Nothing remained. Not a single being, living or dead, survived the purge. Only Winter. As the dust settled and silence overtook the realm, Winter stood alone amidst the ruins of a world he had effectively reset. The powers of the gods, combined with his own vision and determination, had allowed him to enact a cleansing so thorough, so absolute, that no trace of the former chaos remained. Now the realm was a blank canvas, waiting for a new reality to be drawn. Winter contemplated his next steps, the burden of his actions heavy on his soul. He had the power to reshape worlds, to redefine existence, but at what cost? As he looked around at the emptiness he created, the scope of his decisions weighed heavily upon him. The future was his to mold, but the path forward was unclear, laden with the responsibility of his newfound omnipotence. Rebirth of reality. With the remnants of the old world fading into oblivion around him, Winter focused his entire cognitive ability and every ounce of the godly power he had assimilated. His goal was clear: to erase what remained of this corrupted reality and reconstruct it anew. This was not merely an act of power, but a profound responsibility that he bore alone. From the inky blackness that enveloped everything, a new reality began to take shape. It was the reality as it had been before the gods' interference, pure and untouched by the chaos and destruction that had followed. The stars twinkled into existence one by one, and the universe around the world began to shine anew. Piece by piece, the world was reborn, each element meticulously restored to its pristine state. This monumental task stretched what might have been centuries in any normal understanding of time. But here, in the flux of creation, time was a malleable concept. Finally, as the last fragment of reality clicked into place, completing the grand tapestry of the universe, Winter collapsed, utterly exhausted. The godlike powers and essences he had harnessed were all consumed in the Herculean effort of rebirthing reality. His body felt heavy, his mind overwhelmed by the enormity of what he had accomplished. Lying on the newly formed ground, Winter's breathing was heavy, his eyes staring up at the clear blue sky he had restored. For the first time since embarking on this path of manipulation and power, he questioned his actions. "Did it work?" he murmured, his voice a mere whisper against the gentle breeze. Then, breaking the silence that surrounded him, a familiar female voice reached his ears, soft, yet filled with emotion. "Simon, where have you been?" The simplicity of the question, so normal and yet so poignant, struck him deeply. It was Mara's voice, the voice he had longed to hear through all the chaos and destruction, the voice that had driven him to the edge of divinity and back. Her presence confirmed that his efforts had not been in vain. The reality he had strived to restore was not just a replica of the past. It was a continuation, a true resurrection of the world they had lost. As he turned towards the sound of her voice, his heart, which had been weighed down by the burdens of godhood, felt lighter. Mara was here, real and alive in the new world he had recreated. Winter rose to his feet, his fatigue momentarily forgotten, replaced by a rush of relief and joy. The questions and doubts that had clouded his mind faded as he stepped towards Mara, ready to embrace the life he had fought so hard to return to. The world around them was pristine and peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had preceded its rebirth. Winter had not only restored the world, but perhaps in doing so had found his own redemption. As he approached Mara, each step was a step back into the life he had once known, away from the divine conflicts and cosmic battles. Here, in the quiet reality he had resurrected, Simon Winter could finally come home.
Greetings, mortals. I am Elder, the leader of the Elders and master of the Crimson Dawn. Your presence here is both amusing and anticipated. It's always a delight to see fresh faces and familiar ones alike, drawn to our shadowy dance. Thank you for watching the Crimson Dawn series. Your support and viewership feed our unholy cause, and for that you have my begrudging appreciation. But don't let your enthusiasm falter here. Subscribe and ensure you don't miss a single drop of the darkness that flows from our tale. Remember, my dear viewers, an elder is eternal. We thrive in the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. We will win, eventually. For my God, I say. But let's be honest, the prize of the gods is far too tempting to share. Join us, stay with us, and witness our rise. Because in the end, the night belongs to the elders, and your blood will sing for us.
Chapter 1. A New Dawn. Simon Winter and Mara sat together in their rekindled world, their days and nights filled with joy and love, a stark contrast to the chaos and destruction that had once threatened their existence. The world around them continued as it had before the apocalypse, seemingly untouched by the catastrophic events that Simon had navigated through realities to undo. Birds chirped in the morning. The sun rose and set with comforting regularity, and life in all its mundane and miraculous forms flourished. Simon, now free from the burdens of godlike powers and cosmic battles, found a profound joy in simply being with Mara. His heart, which had once been consumed by the necessity of survival and the heavy responsibilities of power, now reveled in the peace that his actions had restored. Every moment with Mara was a reminder of what he had fought for, and why every sacrifice had been worth it. However, as they sat overlooking a serene landscape from their porch one quiet evening, a thoughtful expression crossed Simon's face. Mara noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor, her intuitive gaze meeting his. "What is it, Simon?" she asked gently, her hand finding his. Simon took a deep breath, his eyes reflecting the weight of secrets he had yet to share. "Mara, there's something I need to tell you about," he began, his voice steady but filled with the gravity of his experiences. "The peace we're enjoying now, it almost didn't happen. There was an apocalypse in an alternate reality, one where a lichen curse set everything into motion." Mara listened intently as Simon explained the intricate details of the alternate reality, the rise of supernatural factions, the wars between gods, and how it all traced back to the curse of a single lichen bite. The tale was fantastical, yet imbued with a truth that only Simon could impart, having lived through it all. "And it all started from the curse of a single bite," Simon reiterated, his gaze distant as he remembered the trials he had faced. "I've already put plans in place to make sure this does not happen again in our reality. We have a chance to prevent any such future from unfolding here." Mara nodded, her trust in Simon unwavering. "What do you need to do, Simon?" she asked, ready to support him in whatever came next. Simon turned to her, his resolve clear in his eyes. "I need to go somewhere to rescue an old friend, someone who was pivotal in more ways than one in stopping the chaos. The Alpha," he disclosed, referring to the lichen leader he had raised and who had stood by him through thick and thin in the alternate reality. Mara understood the importance of this mission, not just to Simon, but to ensuring the continued stability of their world. "Then we'll do this together," she said, her voice filled with determination. As they planned their next steps, Simon felt a renewed sense of purpose. The task ahead was not just a rescue mission, but a preventive strike against potential threats to their restored peace. Together, Simon and Mara prepared to step out into the world, not as survivors of a dark past, but as architects of a hopeful future. The guardian of the curse. In the flickering candlelight of their ancestral home, the Graham family gathered around an old wooden table, their voices low as they murmured an ancient protection prayer. Passed down through generations, this prayer was a solemn ritual, one meant to safeguard them and the world from the curse they were bound to guard. Outside, the storm raged fiercely, lightning flashing across the sky, each burst momentarily revealing the sinister silhouette of the creature chained in the cellar below. With each flash, the creature rattled its chains, a haunting sound that spoke of centuries-old fury and desperation for release. Upstairs, the Grahams continued their prayers, the atmosphere thick with a mix of fear and duty. John, the head of the family, felt the weight of his ancestors' legacy heavily upon his shoulders. They were the protectors, tasked with keeping the beast locked away in the cellar, a beast that had once terrorized the land until it was subdued and bound by powerful magic. Suddenly, a knock at the door sliced through the storm's howl, startling the family. John approached the door cautiously, his heart pounding. On the doorstep stood a stranger, his clothes drenched, his eyes pleading for refuge from the storm. After a moment's hesitation, driven by the ingrained duty to protect the secret within their home, John refused the man entry and slammed the door in his face. The rejected stranger, Tom, scanned the Graham family's grounds for any other shelter from the unforgiving storm. He spotted an old tool shed and made his way towards it, hoping for at least a dry place to rest for the night. As Tom settled into the cramped space, trying to make himself comfortable among the musty smells and garden tools, a peculiar noise caught his attention. It sounded like chains, followed by a dog-like whimper. Curious and concerned, Tom stepped out into the rain, following the sounds to a small opening at the side of the house. The growling and the clashing of chains grew louder as he approached. "I'll help you, boy," Tom called out softly, thinking perhaps a dog had been left out in the storm. Just as he was about to reach his hand into the opening, a voice stopped him cold. "I would not do that if I were you." Tom jerked his head up, and in the brief illumination from a lightning strike, he saw the dark outline of a man standing near him, his face obscured by a chrome mask. The mask shimmered eerily under the storm's intermittent lighting, giving the man an otherworldly appearance. Frightened by the sudden appearance and the chilling warning, Tom scrambled back, his heart racing. Without a second glance, he ran off into the night, the image of the masked man etched into his memory, a stark reminder that some shelters are far more dangerous than the storms they protect us from. The release inside the ancient home of the Graham family, the continuous chanting of prayers created a soothing rhythm that echoed through the walls, calming the beast trapped in the cellar. These prayers, passed from father to son over centuries, held the power to pacify the primal rage of the creature below. As John Graham led his family in the ritual, there came another knock at the door. Annoyed and thinking it was the stranger from before, John initially ignored it. However, the knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Finally, the door swung open. A man wearing a chrome mask stepped into the threshold of the ancient home. John's instinctual fear erupted into a scream. "You must leave here." "No," the masked man, Winter, responded firmly. "I have come to relieve you of your burden. You are no longer the keepers of the Alpha. I am." Without waiting for permission, Winter moved decisively towards the cellar. John instinctively reached out to stop him, but found himself frozen mid-step, immobilized by Winter's supernatural influence. Outside, the sky growled with thunder, and lightning flashed, mirroring the tension inside the house. As Winter began to unbolt the heavy cellar door, the roar and growls from behind it reverberated off the stone walls. He stepped inside, and a single flash of lightning briefly illuminated the creature's face. A primal, huge, powerful werewolf capable of tearing any man apart. It pulled at its chains aggressively as it roared at Winter, its primal rage driving it to attack. "Hello, old friend," Winter said calmly, his voice cutting through the growls. At his words, the Alpha's rage began to subside. This creature was not merely the Alpha from the lore of the Graham family. It was the Alpha Winter had raised from a cub in an alternate reality. Somehow, Winter had replaced the original Alpha with this one when reconstructing the world. Approaching the beast, Winter reached out and embraced it. The Alpha, every fiber of its being screaming to tear this man apart, instead hesitated, then reciprocated the embrace. Deep within its mind lay buried memories of Winter, memories of a father figure who had nurtured and protected it. This connection, forged in another reality, had transcended worlds, bringing with it a profound bond. As they stood there, man and beast locked in an unlikely embrace, the Graham family watched in stunned silence from the top of the cellar steps. The centuries-old burden of guarding the Alpha was lifted, and a new chapter began. Not just for them, but for the Alpha and Winter as well. This moment marked a turning point, a resolution of past curses, and the beginning of a reconciliation between what had once been and what could now be. Winter, having restored his friend and confidant, now faced the task of integrating the Alpha into this new, peaceful reality, ensuring that the horrors of the past would never re-emerge. Shadows of New Orleans. In the sultry darkness of New Orleans, a shadow moved with supernatural grace, slipping through the night like a whisper of smoke. It climbed skillfully up a wall to an open window, entering the quiet room with a predatory silence. Inside, a young man lay sleeping alone in his bed, Unaware of the danger that had just permeated his sanctuary, the shadow materialized into a more defined form, Serana. With a swift, fluid motion, she gorged herself on her latest victim, the life draining from him unnoticed in the deep slumber of the night. Satisfied, Serana slipped out of the home, her shadowy figure merging effortlessly with the surrounding darkness. She made her way back to her home, a private estate nestled miles away from any neighbors, a haven where she could relax and feel secure in her solitude. As she arrived at her sanctuary, a voice broke the silence, sending a chill through the air. "So, this is where you came from," murmured a voice from the shadows. Startled, Serana's eyes narrowed, and her fangs bared instinctively in anticipation of an attack. From the darkness emerged a figure, Elder. His presence was as commanding as it was unexpected. "Who are you? Are we enemies?" Serana demanded, her stance defensive, yet poised for any necessary confrontation. "Enemies? We are the best of friends," Elder replied, his voice carrying a calm assurance that contrasted sharply with the tension of the moment. Recognizing the need to clarify his unexpected appearance, Elder quickly relayed his story. "I was trapped in the ice, chased there many years ago, my fate to be released many years from now. Then, he, Nocturna, spoke to me. He awakened me. He told me how we had been wronged, and he needed me." Elder's revelation hinted at a deeper narrative, one of betrayal and revival. "Then I remembered," he continued, "and my first thought was of you." His words hung in the air, filled with a mix of nostalgia and unresolved tension. Serana, though initially taken aback by the sudden intrusion, began to lower her guard as the familiarity of Eldor's presence and their shared past came rushing back. The realization that they were both manipulated and now potentially allies in a new reality prompted a cautious reevaluation of her stance. Their reunion, under the eerie glow of the moonlight filtering through the branches of ancient oaks, marked the beginning of a new chapter. As they stood in the quiet of Serana's estate, the night whispered of old bonds rekindled and new paths to be forged. Elder and Serana, once key players in a cosmic game manipulated by higher powers, now found themselves as potential collaborators in a world that had dramatically shifted around them. Together, they would need to navigate this new existence, understanding their roles and the potential alliances and enemies that lay in wait. The night in New Orleans had brought them back together, but the dawn might bring new challenges and opportunities as they sought to understand their place in this reshaped reality. The ritual of remembrance. In the seclusion of Serana's private estate, under the cloak of night, Elder prepared to perform a ritual, one steeped in ancient magic and secrecy. He arranged the necessary artifacts in a precise formation around Serana, who sat calmly, her eyes closed in anticipation. Elder began chanting in a low, resonant voice, his words weaving through the air like threads of an unseen tapestry. As the ritual progressed, a soft luminescence enveloped Serana, the light flickering with each syllable Elder pronounced. The energy in the room grew thick, almost palpable, as the boundaries between past and present blurred. Serana's mind was guided by the ritual's power, journeying back to the alternate realm where battles were fought in a cosmic game orchestrated by gods. When the ritual concluded, Serana's eyes snapped open, a flood of lost memories now restored. Her expression shifted from tranquility to shock, and then to a profound realization. "We lost," she said slowly, the weight of the memories pressing down on her. "No, my dear, they cheated," Elder responded with a slight smile, his voice carrying both reassurance and a hint of manipulation. But Winter returned this reality as it was, which means Nocturna is with us. Winter had the choice to rebuild this reality without the gods, but for some reason he chose to bring them back, which means we still have a chance to win. Eldur's words were calculated, aimed at rekindling a fire of ambition within Serana. We can gather the Elders and take this world before any of the others realize what transpired. Technically, no god won, so the prize is still up for grabs, he explained, his plan unfolding with each word. And what of Winter? Serana asked, her tone laced with a mix of concern and curiosity. The memories of Winter's power and his decisive actions in the alternate realm were fresh in her mind. He has given up his power. He no longer possesses the power of the gods, Eldur informed her, his voice tinged with a satisfaction that did not go unnoticed. The implication was clear. Without Winter's godlike abilities, he was no longer a direct threat to their ambitions. Serana absorbed this information, her mind racing with the possibilities now open to them. The game was still on, the board reset, but the players modified, with Eldur's guidance and the knowledge of what had been and what could yet be. Together, Eldur and Serana began to plot their next moves. The night's revelations had not only restored lost memories, but had also reawakened a strategic cunning in Serana, one that would be necessary in the days to come. As dawn approached, the pair were already deep in discussions, plotting to rally the Elders and reassess their allies and enemies in this familiar yet entirely new world. Their conversation continued into the early hours, under the same stars that had witnessed the rise and fall of gods and men in countless realities. For Eldur and Serana, this was more than a second chance. It was an opportunity to rewrite the end of their story. The whisper of Necros. In the sterile environment of his laboratory, filled with the hum of machinery and the faint chemical scent of progress, Stephen Lestat was engrossed in his latest series of experiments. His focus was on gene technology and biological research, areas where he had hoped to push the boundaries of science. The lab was a sanctuary of intellect and curiosity, a place detached from the supernatural chaos that had once consumed the world. "Stephen," a voice suddenly erupted from the darkness, causing Stephen to jerk upright, his eyes scanning the shadowy corners of the lab. "Who said that?" he demanded, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet space. "It is I, Necros," the voice returned, more pronounced this time, as if it were emanating from the very walls around him. "Necros? Who is that?" Stephen asked, his confusion apparent. The name felt foreign, yet vaguely resonant, as if it were a forgotten dream surfacing in his consciousness. "Do not be alarmed," the voice continued, its tone both commanding and eerily soothing. "Soon I shall return you to your glorious self. But first, you must continue your experiments on the reincarnation of dead tissue. It is not as hopeless as you once thought. Now you have me to aid you." Stephen, ever the scientist, was momentarily puzzled by the mention of returning to his glorious self, but the promise of advancing his research intrigued him more than the mysterious origins of the voice. His scientific mind buzzed with questions about the methods and possibilities, rather than the ethics or the strange nature of this unseen guide. Intrigued by the potential of what Necros suggested, Stephen's thoughts quickly turned to the technical challenges of reanimating dead tissue. The concept wasn't new to him. It was a frontier he had dabbled in, bordered by the fine lines between genius and madness. Yet, now instilled with new knowledge and insight from Necros, Stephen felt a renewed vigor to pursue this avenue. He began to draft plans for a virus, one intricately designed to reanimate dead tissue. This virus would be his masterpiece, a creation that could blur the lines between life and death. The more he delved into the work, the more consumed he became. Necros' voice continued to guide him, providing insights that no ordinary scientist could have imagined, insights that seemed to echo from an otherworldly understanding of biology and physics. As Stephen worked, the lab around him seemed to grow darker, the shadows deeper. The world outside the lab felt increasingly distant, as if Stephen were moving further away from reality and deeper into a realm where only his experiments and the voice of Necros existed. He was lost in the knowledge being imparted to him, his every waking moment devoted to the creation of the virus. Little did Stephen know, his work, spurred by Necros' whisperings, was setting the stage for something far beyond ordinary scientific discovery. This virus, fueled by the dark intentions of a resurrected god, could potentially unleash consequences that Stephen had not yet begun to comprehend. As he toiled in his lab, the boundary between helper and manipulator blurred, with Necros shaping a future that could once again alter the fabric of reality. Bonds beyond realities. Winter sat with Mara in his private retreat, a secluded villa nestled away from the nearest town, a place of peace and quiet reflection. He looked at her with a soft expression, his voice gentle yet filled with excitement. "Come, Mara, I want you to meet him," he said. "Is it safe, Simon?" Mara asked, a hint of concern in her voice. "Yes, my love. He means so much to me. He was the one thing that kept my humanity intact in that other place. Without him, I would have lost all compassion and empathy, drifting into a world governed solely by logic," Simon explained, his words revealing the deep emotional bond he shared with this unseen presence. On Winter's estate stood a unique building, den-like in structure, blending naturally into the surrounding wilderness. Mara followed Simon as they entered the building. Inside, Simon gave a whistle, and in response, a powerful roar echoed back, vibrating through the air. They walked deeper into the darkness of the den. Suddenly, from out of the shadows, a giant beast leapt forward and pinned Winter to the ground. Mara screamed in fear, but her panic turned to surprise as Winter laughed, his voice filled with joy. "You big furball," he chuckled. The Alpha, recognizing its old friend, let Winter up and nudged him affectionately with its massive head. Mara stood back a moment, taking in the sight of the formidable creature. "My goodness, you are as majestic as Simon said," she remarked, awe coloring her tone. The Alpha raised its head, almost as if showing pride. Winter laughed. "Don't tell him that. He'll get a big head." He then turned to Mara, introducing the two. "This is Mara. Mara, this is..." He paused, realizing he never really had a name for the Alpha. "This is my son," he finally said. Mara looked at Winter and then at the Alpha, her initial fear replaced by a warm smile of understanding. The Alpha, ferocious, primal, and huge, yet here, was gentle and protective, nudged Winter again as if to acknowledge the introduction. Then, Winter's expression turned somber, a heavy heart evident in his eyes. "Will you feel it too, old friend?" he said softly to the Alpha. He turned to Mara, explaining the weight of his choices in reforming this reality. "When I reformed this reality, I had the choice to remove the gods once and for all, to eradicate the evil of this world, but doing so would have also removed their creations, the elders, the undead, and the lichens." He sighed deeply, his gaze shifting between Mara and the Alpha. "No matter how much I desired a perfect world, it couldn't truly be perfect without him." He gestured towards the Alpha. "So now, I stand with you both, and we shall face what comes to us together. And rest assured, it's coming." Mara reached out, taking Winter's hand, her eyes filled with a new understanding and resolve. Together, with the Alpha by their side, they prepared to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. united by bonds that transcended worlds and realities. The prelude to unrest, as the serene twilight enveloped Winter's villa, casting long shadows over the peaceful landscape. The tranquility of this idyllic scene belied the brewing storm. The world, freshly sculpted by Winter's hand, balanced precariously on the edge of a knife, with old powers awakening and new alliances forming in the shadows. Hidden in the folds of darkness, the elders, led by Elder and Serana, are regrouping. With memories of past manipulations and battles fresh in their minds, they plot to reclaim their influence. Their ancient knowledge and supernatural prowess position them as formidable players in the unfolding saga. As they marshal their forces, the question remains: will their renewed presence stabilize the realm, or will it plunge it back into chaos? In a lab shrouded in secrecy, Stephen Lestat delves deeper into the realms of science and the supernatural. Guided by the whispers of Necros, he edges closer to a breakthrough that could redefine life and death. The undead, once mere pawns in a larger game, might soon rise anew under his command. Will his creations be the harbingers of salvation or agents of destruction? Now free from the chains of his past, the Alpha stands beside Winter and Mara, a symbol of strength and resilience. But as the world shifts around him, his primal instincts and deep-seated loyalty will be tested. How will the Alpha navigate this new reality, where the lines between friend and foe blur, and every shadow could hide a threat? Together, Mara and Winter face the future, their bond forged through trials in twisted realities. As the architects of this new world, they must decide how to protect their creation without falling into the traps of their predecessors. With enemies at the gate and the fabric of reality at stake, their choices will determine the fate of all. As the curtain rises on the next chapter of Crimson Dawn, one question looms large. Will the world once again be overrun by the machinations of the supernatural, or will the efforts of Winter, Mara, and their allies maintain the fragile peace they fought so hard to achieve? Stay tuned for Part 7, where ancient forces collide with modern resolve in a battle to shape the destiny of the realm. The adventure continues, and the realm waits with bated breath to see if the dawn will bring light, or if the crimson shadows will engulf the world once more.
Greetings, mortal. It's Serana. I do hope you have been enjoying Crimson Dawn and are looking forward to me and Elder finally gaining victory. We are, of course, the most powerful. Lycan, undead, humans, and even Winter will fall before us. So, look out for future episodes coming soon. And don't forget to subscribe to the Professor Shadow channel. Unless you want a visit from me, in the night. In the meantime, check out this other video by Professor Shadow.